Good morning and welcome to Elevate Your Day.
We can get through just about any pain or suffering if we know that the Lord is in it with us. But when we feel forsaken or abandoned, our pain becomes unbearable. In Genesis 39, you see the recurring phrase, "The Lord was with Joseph." Joseph's entire story rests on these 5 words. They will prove to be an anchor in turbulence and reconciliation in what seems irreconcilable.
Then the Lord said to Abram, "Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out of it with great possessions." Genesis 15:13 through 14. How about that for a nice little heads up? You're going to be afflicted for 400 years. Hang in there.
Hang in there.
Wow. Think about Joseph's forced trip to Egypt, how it was linked to the prophecy that God gave Abraham.
Right. So that would have been his grandfather or great-grandfather? Let's see. Joseph, Jacob, his great-grandfather. So his great-grandfather received this prophecy, and Joseph is starting the fulfillment of it.
Wow.
Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there.
Now we know who bought him. We said, what does it have to do with those Midianites that passed by? Mm-hmm. It was the Ishmaelites who bought him. And
right.
The one who bought him was Potiphar.
From the Ishmaelites, yeah.
Oh, so the Israelites bought him on the road.
Right.
Potiphar got him from them.
Correct.
And Potiphar doesn't deal with the Midianites, so if they would have traded him to the Midianites, he would have never made it to Potiphar, and therefore never made it to Pharaoh. Mm-hmm. That's my guess. Sorry, go ahead.
The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Mm-hmm. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, I lost my place here.
Yeah,
sorry.
from the time. You were
From
right.
the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. So Potiphar was blessed because Joseph was blessed. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance.
God never leaves out details in these. That's Genesis 39, 1 through 6. Now all that has to do with how Joseph was helping this Egyptian master be blessed. Okay?
Right.
And then he says, and Joseph was good looking. Huh? Weird, huh?
I know.
Digging into scripture is weird. Many years before Joseph's descent into Egypt, God foretold that the Israelites would be enslaved in a foreign land. You heard us read that earlier. We don't know if Joseph was aware of that revelation, but it shows us that God's hand was on Joseph's steps, even though his journey must have felt fully to the contrary.
Right.
And the author notes, I'm not suggesting that the evil plan of the brothers, or being sold into slavery, were somehow good things because God's plan was being worked out. Joseph later refers to his brother's actions as plainly evil. Author's note there, so you understand that a little better. The interplay between God's sovereignty and human evil is a mystery for the ages, but I'm hoping you will see that what must have felt entirely out of God's will for Joseph, arriving in Egypt, was actually part of God's plan. You know, Israel enslaved Egypt for 400 years so that she might grow into a great nation whom God would deliver. Look at that. 400 years, how that, everything fits.
Right.
Hold on, let me move that up for you.
The fact that the God of Israel was with Joseph in the faraway and pagan land of Egypt is so profound and comforting that there's no way to overstate it. We simply can't imagine God's reach. What?
It's everywhere. I mean,
He's
yeah.
everywhere. He's omnipresent is the Bible word for it.
And once you realize that he's everywhere, then distance doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter how far it is from Israel to London to New York. It doesn't matter. He's everywhere. So it's better than any high-speed fiber network. I mean, it's just instant communications.
Right.
Instant. Everywhere. He's already there. Maybe God should had one nickname called Already There. Does he?
I don't know.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. In our Western culture, we tend to think of God's blessing and our suffering as mutually exclusive. We think of blessings as all the good things happening in the middle of all the good times. But in Joseph's story, we discover something that challenges our mindset, even as believers. Certain blessings can only come in the midst of our suffering.
Oh, that's the concept. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Only certain blessings can only come in the midst of suffering.
Right. And they didn't even go into all of the suffering that Joseph went through.
No.
I mean, that was just the first step, right?
Yeah, this has been a brief on Joseph's suffering.
Right. So he was growing in power and position. And then, because he was good looking...
Yes. Oh, they didn't even cover
They
Potiphar.
didn't even cover Potiphar's wife and how she tried to seduce him and then blamed it on him.
Yeah.
Threw him in jail for years.
The beginning of the Me Too movement.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, fake news.
Right.
False
And
accusations.
then he told about dreams, and that's how he was actually
Thrown-
released
yeah.
from prison.
Right.
After, it was probably 12 years or something.
Really?
It was a long time he was in prison. And yet he still praised God during that suffering. I mean, he didn't really suffer while he was working in Potiphar's house because he was raised in power. The suffering, I guess, would be just the distance from his family, right?
Yeah, and playing a different person. It's a totally
Right.
different identity. He was a slave,
Yeah,
and then suddenly he's second in charge.
yeah,
He wasn't the same complexion, probably, same facial features. They knew he was an outsider.
right.
How in the world did the Pharaoh pick this outsider to be his number one guy? The people of the land must have either, I guess if we studied deeper, I would know, been either in disbelief or in awe. One or the other.
Well, and, you know, after he was pulled out of prison, it was because of the dream that Pharaoh had, and nobody could interpret it.
Then he was raised up as a hero.
Joseph was able to interpret it, and he gave him good advice. And that good advice is why he was put in charge.
And it helped the nation with their
Right.
famine and whatnot, right.
And he was able to transform his appearance to appear more
Yeah.
Egyptian.
That's what I'm
because
saying.
in the end, his brothers didn't even recognize him.
That's what I'm thinking, because then the other part of the story, if you haven't heard it, is that during these 7 years of famine in the other nations, his brothers came asking for grain.
Mm-hmm.
They came asking for commodities to the second in charge in Egypt, and it happened to be Joseph, their little brother.
And they didn't even recognize him.
And they didn't know it was him.
Yeah.
He had to take a break. He actually had to step back for a minute, go back in the tent, and catch his breath when they came to ask. But he was very gracious to them, and an unbelievable story. Joseph, yeah, we'll study more on Joseph, but thank you for for pointing out that we just barely touched the surface with that guy's life.
Yes, we really did. Certain blessings can only come in the midst of suffering.
Speaking of this Prince of Egypt, that's a play you're doing this summer.
Yes, that's about Moses.
Okay. Nice.
That's the coming out, right?
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
So she's going to be in that one after these other ones.
Yeah, I'm excited about that because I love the music in that movie. And it is pretty close to the same music. They kept true to the story.
Really?
Yeah. In Egypt, Joseph was rising in power and position, and he had found favor with his master, and his work was prospering. Still, all these blessings fell upon Joseph in a land far away from his family and in a culture that didn't worship his God.
Right.
And so that was the suffering, even in his best time in Egypt, he still struggled with.
Yeah.
The blessings were abounding in the midst of his suffering.
Are you refusing God's blessing in the midst of your suffering or your trial? Take some time to surrender your pain to the Lord. Tell him you're willing to receive his blessing, even if they look different than what you're hoping for. Thank him for his presence with you and ask him to manifest that presence so it brings you peace, comfort, and joy.